The US government has officially shut down as of October 1st, 2025, and this could affect millions of Americans. Here's everything you need to know. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel She Speaks Anyways. If this is your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we're breaking down complex things into easy to understand content. Today, we're covering the 2025 government's shutdown. What caused it, who's affected, and when might it end? Let's dive in. So, what exactly happened? At midnight on October 1st, 2025, the federal government officially entered a shutdown for the first time in 6 years. This happened because Congress failed to pass a funding bill before the September 30th deadline, which was the last day of the 2025 fiscal year. Here's the quick version. The government needs money to operate, and Congress has to approve that funding. When they can't agree on how to fund the government, non-essential services shut down until they reach a deal. It's basically like when you don't pay your bills, things get shut off, except this is the entire federal government we're talking about. Let me give you some numbers to put this in perspective. Approximately 750,000 federal employees could be furloughed daily. That means they sent home without pay. Essential workers like military personnel and TSA agents, they must continue working, but here's the kicker. They don't get paid during the shutdown either. They'll get back pay once the government reopens, but that doesn't help them pay their bills right now. The daily cost of compensation for these furloughed workers is around $400 million. Now, this isn't the first time this has happened. In fact, since 1980, there have been 14 government shutdowns. The longest one lasted 35 days, from December 2018 to January 2019, and that shutdown cost the economy $11 billion. So yeah, these shutdowns are expensive and disruptive. Why did this happen? Alright, so what caused this shutdown? This is the result of a major political standoff between Republicans and Democrats, and at the center of it all is healthcare funding. Let me break down both sides for you because it's important to understand what each party is saying. On the Republican side, they proposed what they call a clean continuing resolution. Basically, this is a short-term funding bill that would keep the government running at current levels until November 21st. This would give Congress 7 more weeks to negotiate a full-year budget. Republicans are saying, look, let's just pass basic funding first to keep the government open, and then we can negotiate all these other issues afterward. They also point out that they control the White House, the House, and the Senate, so they feel like they should be able to set the terms. Their position is that Democrats are holding government funding hostage to push through their policy demands. Now let's look at the Democratic side. Democrats refused to support the Republican bill unless it included specific healthcare provisions. There are 2 main things they're fighting for. First, they want an extension of enhanced ACA tax credits. These are subsidies that help millions of Americans afford their health insurance premiums, and they're set to expire at the end of 2025. Second, Democrats want to reverse some Medicaid cuts that were made in Trump's earlier legislation. Democrats are arguing that health insurance premiums could skyrocket for millions of Americans if these subsidies expire. They're saying these issues can't wait until after the shutdown because people need to know now whether their insurance premiums are going to double or triple next year. They also claim that Republicans are refusing to negotiate in good faith. Now here's where it gets really controversial. There's also a dispute about whether some immigrants with legal status should be eligible for healthcare subsidies. Republicans claim that Democrats want to provide benefits to undocumented immigrants. Democrats strongly deny this. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said very clearly that federal law already prohibits using taxpayer dollars to provide medical coverage to undocumented individuals, and that nothing they've proposed changes that law. So what's the reality here? Both proposals failed in the Senate. Republicans need 60 votes to pass their bill, but they only have 53 senators. 3 Democrats did break ranks and vote with Republicans. Senators John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, Catherine Cortez Masto from Nevada, and independent Angus King from Maine voted for the Republican plan. But it wasn't enough. Both sides are dug in, and that's why we have a shutdown. Who's affected? Now let's talk about who's actually affected by the shutdown, because this isn't just some abstract political fight. This impacts real people and real services that Americans depend on every single day. First, let's talk about federal workers. Essential employees, that includes our military personnel, law enforcement officers, TSA agents at airports, and air traffic controllers. They all must continue working. But here's the problem, they won't get paid until the shutdown ends. Imagine having to go to work every day knowing you're not going to see a paycheck. Non-essential employees are furloughed, which means they're sent home without pay. Now, all affected workers will receive back pay once the government reopens, but that's little comfort when you have rent due next week or groceries to buy today. So what services actually continue during a shutdown? Social Security payments will keep going out. Medicare and Medicaid payments continue, though there may be some delays in processing. VA benefits keep coming, although some services are reduced. Air travel continues normally with TSA screening. Border patrol operations continue. Active fire suppression by the National Park Service continues, and emergency medical services keep running. So the really critical stuff that keeps going. But here's what stops or gets significantly reduced. National parks and museums, the Smithsonian museums, are temporarily using leftover funds to stay open, but only until October 6th. After that, they'll close. The National Zoo's animal camps are already offline, although don't worry, the animals are still being fed and cared for. Federal student loans, this is a big one for a lot of people. The Department of Education is furloughing 95% of its staff. New grant-making activities are completely halted, and student loan servicing may be delayed. If you're waiting on loan forgiveness or trying to change your repayment plan, you're probably going to be waiting a lot longer now. The CDC and public health services are operating at reduced capacity. Disease outbreak monitoring continues, which is good, but they're hampered in providing public health information and guidance to the public. They can't respond to inquiries about public health issues, and they've stopped analyzing surveillance data for certain diseases. Only about a third of CDC staff is working during the shutdown. Federal courts may face delays. Civil litigation cases may be postponed unless they involve the safety of human life or the protection of property. And here's something concerning. Courts have faced years of tighter budgets, which means they can't sustain full operations during a shutdown as long as they could in the past. The FDA's food safety monitoring is reduced. They'll continue drug and medical device reviews and handle recalls, but they've warned that they won't be able to monitor the use of new ingredients in animal food, which means they can't ensure that meat, milk, and eggs from livestock are safe for the public to eat. The USDA has halted new direct and guaranteed home loans. Any scheduled loan closings are postponed. The NIH has frozen research grants to external organizations like universities. They won't admit new patients to their research hospital unless it's medically necessary. And there are a bunch of other services affected too. About 60% of EPA staff are furloughed. Freedom of Information Act requests won't be processed. The Federal Trade Commission is completely closed, so consumers can't even report fraud during the shutdown. As for the economic impact, the Congressional Budget Office estimated that the last major shutdown in 2018 to 2019 permanently cost the economy about $3 billion. The cost of the shutdown will depend entirely on how long it lasts, but every day it continues, that number goes up. The political blame game. Alright, so who's to blame for all this? Well, that depends entirely on who you ask, because both sides are pointing fingers at each other. Republicans are saying that Democrats are shutting down the government over policy demands. Their argument is that healthcare negotiations should happen separately from basic government funding. They also point out that Democrats voted for similar funding extensions in the past. So, why not now? House Speaker Mike Johnson said that Democrats need to come to their senses and do the right thing. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has been very clear that he will not negotiate on healthcare subsidies while the government is shut down, which creates this impossible situation. Democrats are firing back saying, look, Republicans control the White House, the House, and the Senate. This is their shutdown. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said Republicans can't just say it's our way or the highway, and that they're driving straight toward a shutdown. Democrats argue that healthcare can't wait because millions of Americans need to know now whether their insurance premiums are about to skyrocket. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries accused Republicans of playing political games and said they're fighting to protect Americans' healthcare. Now here's where things get really controversial. The Trump administration has been using federal government websites to blame Democrats for the shutdown. If you go to the HUD website right now, there's a bright red banner that says, "The radical left in Congress shut down the government." The Department of Veterans Affairs has similar messages saying radical liberals in Congress are to blame. This is highly unusual for government websites, and ethics experts are saying this may violate the Hatch Act, which is the law that limits partisan political activity by federal employees. When President Obama dealt with a shutdown in 2013, he wrote a letter to federal employees that thanked them for their service and criticized Congress without specifically blaming Republicans by name. What we're seeing now is much more explicitly partisan. President Trump has also suggested using the shutdown to implement mass layoffs of federal workers as part of his goal to permanently reduce the federal workforce. He said last week that he would look for a way to do a reduction in force if the government closed. This has raised concerns that the shutdown is being used not just as a budget fight, but as a tool to reshape the federal government itself. What happens next? So when will this end? That's the question everyone wants answered, and the honest truth is, nobody knows for certain. Let me walk you through what we know and what the possible scenarios are. Here's the timeline. The Senate held another vote on Wednesday, the day after the shutdown began. That vote failed again with the same result as before. The Senate is planning to break on Thursday for Yom Kippur, the Jewish holiday. Then they'll return on Friday and vote through the weekend on that same Republican funding plan. Republican leaders are trying to peel off more Democratic votes. Senate Majority Whip John Barrasso said after the Tuesday vote, "When we had a vote on our proposal before the recess, we had one Democrat vote. Tonight we had 3, so the cracks are beginning to show." They're hoping that as the shutdown continues, more Democrats will feel pressure to cave and vote for their bill. Let me give you 3 possible scenarios for how this could play out. Scenario 1 is a quick resolution, and by quick I mean within days. If Democrats cave and support the Republican bill without any additions, or if Republicans decide to add some Democratic priorities to get this done, this could end very quickly. But right now, both sides seem pretty dug in, so this seems like the least likely scenario. Scenario 2 is a medium duration shutdown, maybe 1 to 2 weeks. This is probably the most likely outcome. As political pressure builds and the public starts really feeling the effects, one side compromises or they finally negotiate a bipartisan deal. History shows us that these shutdowns usually end when the pain gets bad enough that one side blinks first. Scenario 3 is an extended shutdown lasting weeks or even months. If both sides remain completely dug in and refuse to budge, this could last much longer. Remember, the 2018 to 2019 shutdown lasted 35 days. That's over a month. And honestly, with how polarized our politics are right now, this scenario is more possible than it should be. Some Republican senators have suggested this could resolve next week once real negotiations begin. But here's the problem. Senate majority. Leader John Thune has flat out said he won't negotiate on healthcare subsidies while the government is shut down. Democrats are saying they won't vote to reopen the government without those healthcare provisions. So we have this complete standoff where neither side will negotiate until the other side caves first. What should you be watching for? First, whether more Democrats break ranks and vote with Republicans. If that number grows from 3 to 5 or 6, Republicans might get to that magic number of 60 votes. Second, watch to see if Republicans agree to include any healthcare provisions in their bill. Third, keep an eye on public polling about who Americans blame for the shutdown, because that political pressure matters a lot. And fourth, watch the economic impact as it develops, because if this starts really hurting the economy, that pressure will mount quickly. Historical context. Now you might be wondering, has this happened before? And the answer is yes, many times. Government hour shutdowns have become increasingly common in recent decades. So let's put this in some historical perspective. Since 1980, there have been 14 government shutdowns. Let me tell you about some of the major ones. The 2018 to 2019 shutdown lasted 35 days, making it the longest shutdown in American history. That one was over border wall funding. President Trump wanted $5.7 billion for his border wall, and Democrats refused to give it to him. Federal workers went over a month without pay. The economic damage was severe. In 2013, we had a 16-day shutdown over the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Republicans were trying to defund or delay Obamacare, and Democrats wouldn't budge. And back in 1995 to 1996, we had a 21-day shutdown over budget cuts. That was President Bill Clinton versus Republican House Speaker Newt Gingrich. Clinton held out against steep spending and tax cuts that Republicans wanted. Now here's an interesting piece of history. Before the 1980s, the government would typically continue operating as usual even when funding bills hadn't been passed. But that changed after the Attorney General issued opinions stating that it was illegal for the government to spend money without congressional approval. So shutdowns became the norm during these funding disputes. There's a pattern to these shutdowns. They often happen when different parties control different branches of government, and they use their leverage to fight for their priorities. Most shutdowns in our history have been relatively short, just a few days. But they're typically resolved when one of several things happens. Either public pressure becomes too intense and voters start getting really angry at one party or both, or the economic impact grows too severe and starts hurting too many people. Or one side makes concessions to get the government reopened. Or finally, they reach an actual compromise where both sides give a little to get something done. The thing is, these shutdowns have become more common and more severe over time. What used to be a rare occurrence is now almost routine, and that's not a good sign for our democracy or our economy. What you can do? So what can you do about this? Whether you're directly affected or just concerned about what's happening, there are actually several things you can do. If you're a federal employee who's affected by this shutdown, first thing, check your agency's contingency plan. Every agency has one, and it will tell you whether you're considered essential or if you're being furloughed. Make sure you understand your rights and what back pay you're entitled to. If you rely on federal services and you're worried about delays, try to plan ahead. If you were expecting a loan closing or a permit or some other federal service, contact the agency to find out their status and have backup plans if possible. But even if you're not directly affected, you can still make your voice heard. Here's how. First, stay informed. Follow reliable news sources for updates on this situation. Things are changing day by day, so it's important to know what's actually happening versus what people are saying on social media. Second, and this is really important, contact your representatives. This is literally what they're there for. You can call their offices, send them emails, or message them on social media. Let your senators and representatives know your views on the shutdown. Tell them whether you think they should compromise or if you support their current position. Your voice actually does matter, especially when enough people speak up. You can find your representative's contact information really easily. Just go to house.gov or senate.gov, enter your zip code, and you'll get their phone numbers and email addresses. I know it might feel like calling your representative doesn't do anything, but trust me, when their offices are flooded with calls, they notice. That's political pressure, and it works. Third, be patient and understanding. If you need federal services right now, expect delays. The people who work for these agencies, they didn't choose this shutdown. They're victims of it, just like everyone else. So be kind to federal workers you interact with. They're dealing with a lot right now. For official information about the shutdown, you can go to usa.gov. That's the government's official website. You can also check individual federal agency websites for specific service updates. And of course, keep watching channels like this one that are breaking down what's happening in a way that's easy to understand. All right, let's recap everything we've covered today. The US government shut down on October 1st, 2025 due to a political standoff between Republicans and Democrats. The fight is primarily over healthcare funding, specifically enhanced ACA tax credits that are set to expire, and Medicaid cuts that Democrats want reversed. Republicans want a clean short-term funding bill so they can negotiate these issues separately. Democrats refuse to vote for funding without addressing healthcare now. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers are affected, either furloughed or working without pay. Many government services are disrupted, from national parks to student loans to public health programs. And it's completely unclear how long this will last. So I want to know, what do you think about this shutdown? Who do you think is responsible? Do you think Republicans should add healthcare provisions to their bill? Or do you think that Democrats should vote for the clean funding bill and negotiate later? Let me know in the comments below, but please keep it civil. We're all trying to understand what's happening here, and attacking each other in the comments doesn't help anyone. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm show this video to more people who need to understand what's going on. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss updates. As this situation develops, I'll be making follow-up videos if there are major developments, so you definitely want to be subscribed. One more thing before we go. Remember, regardless of your political views or which party you support, government shutdowns impact real people. Federal workers who are missing paychecks and trying to figure out how to pay their bills. Families who are waiting for services they depend on. Our economy as a whole takes a hit every day. This continues. These aren't just abstract political fights. There are real consequences. So hopefully, our elected officials can find a solution soon and put the needs of the American people first. Thanks so much for watching. Stay informed, stay engaged, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.